Welcome to Unite Now, where we bring unity to you, wherever you are.
Good morning, everybody, or evening, or afternoon, or wherever you're at in the world. Hope everyone is doing well.
Yeah, hello and welcome. Welcome back to our last session together. This is for those of you who have been with us through this entire 6-week series. Thank you so much for coming on this whole journey with us. But yeah, this is our part 3 of our action RPG. We're going to be playing people's games. We're going to be giving some feedback. We're going to be trying to dial in on, some of the pain points that people had. We're just going to give people a couple minutes to filter in and see how everyone's doing. Hopefully.
Yeah, check out that question.
Yeah.
We want to know.
People are saying it's 1 a.m. where they are. So thank you so much for spending your late evening with us. For people who are maybe signing in for the first time, joining us for the first time, this is our Create with Code. Actually, it's our beginner code session. This is our third section of our second set of assignments. So we had a 3-part FPS first-person shooter using the first-person shooter code kit, and then this is our action RPG section, and we're just finishing that up now. So let's see what people are. People said the hardest thing was trying to follow the session last week in the middle of a thunderstorm, and the internet kept breaking down. That's sort of external issues. Definitely. Oh, someone's saying my sound is too low. Let's see. Let me know if that helped any. Let me see if I can pull my mic volume up a little bit.
Well, while you're doing that, somebody posted in the Q&A that they were having some issues with WebGL getting their stuff to upload, and I'm going to post a short tutorial about that if you guys want to check that out if you are having problems with that.
Nice.
Now and in the future. So make sure that you take a look at that, and it's on Unity Learn. So Unity Learn is an amazing site that you can go to that will teach you a lot of massive amount of stuff for Unity. For especially if you got a couple people said in the chat that their hardest part was getting the code to work the way they wanted to, and that's going to happen with time. It's going to happen with time. You just got to keep at it.
Yeah. Is my mic sounding better? Are people able to hear me? Let us know in the chat. Yeah. So a couple things to keep in mind about that, Brian. There's a ton of content on the Unity Learn site that's going to help you, really level up your Unity skill, level up your coding skill. I know that we went very quickly through the material last time. We're going to go over submitting to WebGL again. So we're going to go over the WebGL build, since that seemed like a pain point for a lot of people. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to answer some of your questions and kind of dig into the code, and then we'll play some of the user submissions. I'm doing Brian's job now. I'm telling you guys what's coming up in this session. The thing that I wanted to point out is, as people are mentioning in the chat, Unity Premium was just announced that Unity Premium is going to be free forever. So people who've been really getting a lot out of these sessions, out of the out of the premium content that's on the Learn site, all of that Learn content is going to be free for you guys all forever. So, please make use of it. Yeah, it's a huge resource that's available. So yeah, please make use of it and enjoy it. And we hope that it helps you guys level up your games and level up your game making or whatever you're using Unity for, since it's definitely not. It's definitely not, just for games anymore. Okay. Should we get started?
Let's do
Yeah, I
this,
think we
man.
should. Let's do it. So, yes, for people, again, who are just joining us, I am Alexei Othenin-Girard. This is Brian Kenney. We are going to be kind of co-leading this this session today. We have a bunch of really incredible mods, Alejandro, Mayor, and James, as well as David and Ethan, all of whom are very, very, very skilled and will be able to help you guys with technical questions if you have them. We're going to do, session overview and then some quick announcements. Announcements are fast because, again, we're not going to get, we're sort of responding to you guys this week. So we're taking in user feedback. We're looking for audience questions. So, if you had issues with code that you were having trouble building or bugs that you couldn't quite hunt down, put those in the Q&A and we'll answer them at that audience question section. Then we're going to go ahead and review the WebGL build, how to build to WebGL, what does that even mean, and then how to upload your work to our submissions page. And then finally, we're going to look at a few of our user submissions, which are really cool. People really took this stuff and ran with it. So it's really exciting to see.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, basic stuff. Here's a suggested Zoom layout so that you can make sure that you're still seeing the content on your screen that we're going to go through. So keep people's portraits up at the top of the screen and make sure that you have the chat window open if you need to talk to us. And then just these are some basic ground rules for the webinar. Make sure that you are being respectful to the mods and constructive. Definitely, this session, because it's a little bit of a looser format, you don't need to worry too much about getting stuck or getting lost and losing the thread. But, if you find yourself stuck, all of these sessions are posted online and you will be able to go back and review them. So, if you see a thing that you're like, oh, that's really cool, but it went by really fast and I didn't understand it, don't worry about it. Keep following along, enjoy, watch, and then we'll post the link to go back and watch our previous recordings. Boom. Welcome and announcements are done. So yeah, I think the thing that I want to jump into first is, this is tough material. This is like, we went super fast through functions. We went super fast through variables, through writing simple scripts. So, what are your questions? How can we answer it? How can we respond to what you guys need? Let's see. So I'm opening up the Q&A and seeing if people have questions. So, yeah, like I said before, the work that we did last week, we ran through a ton of material very quickly, and I think that one of the things that people really struggled with, looking at the Q&A, one of the things that people really struggled with, sort of off the right off the bat, was how to think about scope, something called scope. So somebody asks, what are these public-private keywords? What do they mean? So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and talk a little bit about scope. And I'm going to share a script that I wrote last week. So this is hopefully everybody's seeing, this is the spawner sample script that we wrote last week. I think this was actually spawner solution 2. This is the second solution that I showed last week. But I want to talk about kind of what things in this are private to this script and what things in this are public. So C# in Unity, everything defaults to private. So all of your functions, all of your variables, if you don't add a public keyword, they default to private. And what private means is one way to say it is their scope is limited to that script, and another way to say it is nothing outside of that script can see them. So they're not available they're not available for other scripts or for the Unity editor to look at and say, oh, that's a thing that I can recognize and can access. So here's an example of something that is public, where we have this public game object to spawn. And the reason that we've specifically decided to make this game object public is because by making it public, the Unity editor will now give us a field where we can assign that variable, that game object variable, a value. So again, just to break it down, public, that's our access modifier. That tells us, is this private to the script or is this public outside of the script? And since it's public, it's going to be visible and accessible outside of the script. Game object, this is our type, right? Unity knows that this object to spawn object, it needs to be a game object. I can't put a transform in there. I can't put a script in there. It has to be a game object. I might be able to put a script in there because scripts sometimes carry references to game objects, but that's very complicated. We won't get into it right now.
Well, also you can, once people get to their more advanced stages with scripting, you can also serialize that field so it can be seen in the inspector as well. So
that's a good. So I want to show people what this looks like in the inspector. So so I'm going to look at the object, the spawner object that has this script on it. So let me go into my Unity. And again, hopefully I'm trying to keep up in Zoom. So if you're not seeing what I want to be showing, please let us know. But you should be seeing my Unity. And the object that has this spawner script on it is this spawner, I think it's a spawner object. No, this is the spawn point script. That's not exactly what I want. Let's see. I can zoom in here. I know that it is this object, this game object. So this potion spawner object, right? You can see here, down here, this spawner sample script, that's a reference. This component is a reference to the script that I was just showing you. So everything that was in the script that I was just showing you, that's what's being displayed here in spawner script. I keep pointing at my screen and realizing that you can't see me do that, so that's not helpful. Old teaching habits die hard. And what you'll see is right here, there's a field, there's a variable name, object to spawn. Now, if we go back to that spawner sample script, you can see that object to spawn is the name of this public game object. The reason that Unity gives us a field in the editor is that we set this to public, right? We told Unity, hey, I want you to be able to see this and access it and change it from the editor. So we made it public. Brian had a good point. Sometimes we want things to be being public and being accessible from the editor aren't exactly synonymous. Often they're the same. If something's public, we want it to be accessible from the editor. If something's accessible from the editor, we want it to be public. So mostly we can use those interchangeably. But sometimes it's true. We want to have a variable or a value or a field that's private to a script so that it doesn't get used or set or changed by another script or another process somewhere else. And we still want that to be seen by the editor. So what we can do is this, right? We can add the private keyword. In this case, we actually don't need to, because remember that C# defaults to private, but just to show you guys, we can add the private field, and then we can do serialized field. So this is a way to have a private game object or a private variable field that is still going to be seen by the editor. But like Brian said, that's a little bit of a that's like a more advanced technique. For now, though, all you need to remember is, since this is a public game object, this object to spawn variable, this is going to show up in our editor. And what that does is that means that we can connect it to a game object. So in this case, this spawner connects to a potion loot object. So we can look at the potion loot object. So we can look at the potion loot object, and we see that the loot script points to the potion usable item. So for people who maybe were having trouble getting their objects that they had created to spawn in the world, I want to show you what that might look like. So I'm gonna duplicate this spawner object, right? Control C, Control V. Now I have a second spawner, and I kind of need to do a little bit of detective work, right? I know that this spawner is looking at a potion loot object. And I know if I click on this potion loot object that it has this loot script, and it's looking at a potion, which is a usable item. But if I want to change the object that this spawner is going to spawn, I can't just click on the spawner and tell it, oh, actually, instead of potion loot, I want you to spawn this strength potion that I made. I can't do that directly. Instead, what I have to do is click on potion loot. I have to make a new loot object. So what I can do is I can duplicate the potion loot object. There you go. Change the name to strength pot loot, right? So it's the strength potion loot object. Now, this potion usable item, I can change that to strength potion. And now this, now I can change this, the object that the spawner sample script is pointing to, I can change that to the strength pot loot object. Does that make sense? So these loot objects are the things that are actually going to appear on screen. And the spawner calls a loot object, and that loot object calls a specific in-game item in the item database. Sorry. So in order to change what that spawner is spawning, I have to do the two steps of check the spawner, check to see what it is creating, and then if it's creating something that I don't want it to create, I have to make a new version of that object. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully that answered some question. Let's see if there's any other questions to. So let's actually look at the script for this strength potion.
A couple people are asking about that in the Q&A that
Yeah.
you need to show them the script, so that's a good idea.
Yeah. So this is one of the scripts that actually came with the game. So you can, this is a good sample script for you to work from.
Cool.
And let's kind of let's dig into the script a little bit. We went over it a little bit in our previous session, but I think digging in will be really valuable. So again, we start a script, and this is a pretty common practice. When we start a script, we really want to the first thing you want to do is define the variables that the script is going to be using. So the first thing that we are looking at is this duration variable. And we've set it to 10.0f. That F stands for float. Float is a way to describe a number that is not an integer, right? Basically a decimal number. Floating point operator, I think is what it stands for. And what that means is that Unity knows that the duration of this object is going to be 10 seconds. We haven't determined that yet, but we know that the duration value is going to be 10. But since it's a float, we could change this to like 10.5 if we wanted to, right? We don't need to use an integer value here. Times are often described in floats because they're often not, they're not, you don't have to worry about a time or rather, you want a greater amount of specificity when you're talking about 10 seconds. 10.0 tells Unity to really be specific about exactly 10 seconds on screen. Oh, thank you. There we go. So yes, sorry about that. So this is our float duration 10.0f. And again, right now, all we're saying is there's a variable of type float called duration, and we're setting it to 10.0f. Unity, at this line, at line 8 of the script, Unity doesn't know what duration means, and it doesn't know what we're going to use this for. So that name, duration, that's a note to us, right? This is another important coding tip. Give your variables names that are representative of the thing that the value that they hold represents. That'll make it a lot easier for you to read your code.
Good name, yes.
Good naming conventions, yeah. Finally, so then we have a strength change, which is, again, this is the amount by which the strength is going to change. This is an integer because in the way that this code is set up, strength is a whole number value, right? It's an integer value. You can have a strength of 10, you can have a strength of 11, but you can't have a strength of 10.5. You could imagine, a version of this code where, oh yeah, we have strength as float values, or we have strength as like decimal values. But honestly, when you're talking about character stats, it usually doesn't make sense to have your stats be that granular, because in a game, telling someone like, oh, we're going to take your strength from 10 to 10.2, that's not going to make a big in-game impact. That's not going to change the player's experience. So you might as well sort of not do it. So in this case, we have a strength change variable. We set it equal to 5. Note, it doesn't need the F because it's not a float. We're saying this is 5 period, a 5 a whole number of type integer. And then we have this effect sprite of type sprite. So a sprite is like a 2D image that's going to appear on screen. And we can dig into Unity and we can actually see which effect sprite is connected to this to this effect.
And
so
before you move on,
yeah.
There's also something that you could also do with your good naming conventions is also the important use of comments. And I don't know if we've talked about comments, but if you guys are on a dev team and you're working on a script and somebody else is accessing that script, they might not know, or they might have questions about the logic that you're using. So comments are huge. For that, for if you're on a dev team, because you can explain what you're trying to accomplish, and somebody else on your team could also interpret whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So comments are huge. The computer does not recognize them. So you can put in, as Alexei is doing right now, you can put in whatever you want in there, whatever explanation you want. And the computer, it will not affect your code. You won't get any console errors. So.
Right. Yeah.
Very important.
A comment is a way to speak to other people who are reading your code without your computer, without the process or the compiler having to worry about like what you're saying. So it will preserve those. It'll preserve those notes in the script for anyone else to see, but it won't. It won't like. It won't try to parse them. It won't understand them as part of the code. Commenting also has a second nice function, which is so you can do two slashes to get a comment on a line, or you can do /* to comment a whole section of code, and that will continue to be commented until you do */. So this is basically open comment, and then everything inside of that is a comment, and then close comment with an */. And the nice thing about that is that it can actually be really functional when you're playing with different versions of code. You can comment out a block of code so that it doesn't run, so you can see what happens without it, and then comment it back in without cutting and pasting or potentially losing the code itself. But all of this is important, so we're going to put it back in. Okay. So, now we've described, we've defined and initialized our variables. Oops. Now we're going to write a function, or we're going to read a function that's already been written. So this is a public function. So this function is going to be usable by things outside the script. That's really useful because what that means is that some other script can call increase strength effect .use, pass it the character data, and then this will run. So again, let's go over this piece by piece. So this is public because we want it to get called from outside the script. This is an override. Now, an override is again, this is a fairly advanced programming technique, but basically what that means is there's a standard definition for the use function somewhere else in the usable item or usage effect tree. So again, increased strength effect, we didn't talk a lot about inheritance, but basically the way that coding works is we write classes, we write functions, and we group functions together into classes. And then we write family trees of classes that can inherit from each other. The biggest, broadest kind of like overriding tree, the biggest tree is called monobehavior. Everything inherits from monobehavior. Everything descends from monobehavior. But what we see here is the increased strength effect inherits from usage effect, which itself inherits from usable item, which then probably inherits from monobehavior. So we're sort of 4 layers down, and somewhere in that previous set of layers, there's a definition for the use function. And what this is saying is this override is saying, hey, in this case, use this definition for use instead of that one. Finally, this is Boolean, which means that this can either be true or false. What that means is when we call this function, it's going to return a value. In other words, we're going to put some data into this function, and then the function is actually going to pass some data back out. Now, in this case, the data that's being passed out, 2 things. 1, the data that's being passed out always has to be of the same type as the type of the function. So because this is a Boolean function, we know that it's going to pass true, false data out, right? The only value that can come out of this function is going to be either true or false. Boolean values are values that are either true or false. They're basically binary values that are 0 for false or 1 for true. We're using this in a little bit of a different way. Often the way that functions work is we pass some data in, the function manipulates the data, and then passes out the answer. In this case, the function is going to manipulate a bunch of data, but what it passes back out is a signal to the function that called it that just says, does this item disappear out of the player's inventory, or does it stay in the player's inventory? So if it disappears, we're going to pass true. And if it stays in the player's inventory, we're going to pass false. But that's like hard-coded by us. It's not something that's derived from within the function. If that feels really confusing, let us know, and we can go ahead and I can show an example of a very simple function that that will take some data in, add on it, and then return the data back out. Okay. So, but what we know is public function, it's an override. So it's a more specific definition for a function that's been defined somewhere else. It's a Boolean, so it's going to return true or false. The name of the function is use, and it needs some information to work. So anytime, wherever else we're calling this use function, we need to make sure that we're passing it some character data. So we need to pass it a sort of stack of values that are all wrapped up, and we call them character data. And we're going to pass those into this function so that the function can act on them. Okay. Within that function, that bundle of data, we're going to call it user. That's the variable name that we're using for the character data. So anytime we see user in the function, we know that we're referring to that character data. So now, so this is all of this whole line 13, all that is like the signature of the function. All that is it's just telling us how to set up the function, what kind of function it is, what it's going to look like, what it needs to run. We haven't talked at all about what's in the function or what it's running. All that happens here in the body of the function. So once we get into the body of the function, this is what we're starting to see. So we have statsystem.statModifier. If you guys used the API for this, maybe you dug in and started looking at some of these terms. All of these terms in green, statsystem, statModifier, all of those are available in that API, and you can look them up and see kind of what they do. So if these are confusing or you don't know exactly what they mean, then I encourage you to go into that API, look these up individually, and see if you can understand like what exactly they're doing. Because, you know, as programmers, as designers as well, that process is one of the most common ways that people work, right? We get APIs, we have to look into them to see if we can understand them. Eventually, we find the thing that we're looking for. We're like, oh, okay, I get what that is. Here, what we're doing is we're calling this stat modifier function that's inside the stat system. It's inside the stat system script. We're making a new one. So what we're telling this script, what we're telling the increased strength effect script is, hey, call that and get ready to save that inside a function, inside a variable, and the name of that variable is modifier. So we're creating a variable called modifier of type stat modifier, statsystem.statModifier. And the value that we're putting in it is, hey, we're going to make a new stat modifier, and we're going to save it here. Once we've done that, then because we made the stat modifier, we can start to address some of the components of stat modifier. So here you can see we're looking at statsystem.statModifier.mode. And we're setting the mode to absolute. So again, if we looked at that in the API, you'd see there are two different ways to modify stats. You can modify them by percentage, or you can modify them by absolute value. You know, if you modify them by percentage, you might be increasing strength by 20% or 50%. But that would be very different from increasing strength by 20 points or 50 points. So we want this to increase strength by 5 points. So we're setting this to absolute. If I switched this to percentage, that would mean increase the strength by 5%, which might not be anything, depending on what your base strength is. Also note, when I started to type percentage, if I come here to look at the system.statModifier.mode, you'll see I have two possibilities here, absolute and percentage. That's because in stat modifier, we define, hey, there are only two ways for stat modifier.mode to be. They can be absolute or percentage. So I know that people are really excited about the speed script, the speed potion script. I'm going to show you that in just a second. We're getting to that. Trust
They're
me.
really
It's okay.
excited. I
Yeah.
mean, really excited.
I feel that anticipation. So now that we've changed the modifier mode again, so we're saying we're going to make a new modifier. Then we're specifying we want that modifier mode to be absolute. And then the last thing that we do is we define what that modifier is. We're going to say change the stats inside modifier, right, which is a stat modifier object. Change the strength stat inside modifier and change it by this amount, the amount of strength change. Okay, so for people who are really excited for the speed potion, here's a thing for you. So if you looked at stats system.stats or stat system.statModifier.stats, you'd see that there were a bunch of different there were a bunch of different stats that you could play with. Defense is one, and agility is one. So if we want to change this to a strength potion, it's going to do exactly the same thing. All we need to do is change that strength variable here. We're going to change that to agility. And now, in order to make our script easier to read, we should change this to speed. We should change this to speed. But all of this is these are all just changes to make it easier to read. Under the hood, it was changing this from strength to agility that really changed what this script is going to do. Because what this is saying is this new stat modifier, right? When we use this potion, so when we call the use variable, the use function of this increased strength effect potion, we're going to take a new modifier, set the modifier mode to absolute, and then dig down into that strength stat and change that, right? And once we've changed this from strength to agility, now we're changing agility instead of strength. Now, one thing is the different stats have different values, right? And one thing that I found was that my speed potion was actually like not great. If I just add 5 to the player's agility, I don't see a big difference. So one thing I can do is I can say, actually, instead of adding 5, I want this speed potion to add 20% to my agility stat, right? So now, however high my agility stat is, the speed potion is going to increase it by another 20% for a duration of 10 seconds. Note, though, that you will also, you don't want to make these changes inside the increased strength effect script. You want to actually copy the increased strength effect script, change the copy to an increased speed effect script, and then make those changes there. So, but the basic changes are exactly the same. All we need to do is change that strength to agility. I'm gonna set everything back to strength because otherwise I will mess up my my increased strength effect script. And just to sort of finish this out, we have a VFX, a visual effects manager. So again, this is all visual effects stuff that's saying, hey, we're gonna play a visual effect with the of type getting stronger. So this is pre-generated inside the VFX manager or inside Play VFX probably. And then we're going to put it at the user's transform position. So we're going to make a visual effect happen wherever the user currently is. And then finally, this is the line that puts it all together. This is like, to a certain extent, everything above here, at least everything here, this is all just defining more and more closely. This is just defining a variable, right? We're making a new variable called modifier that's a stat modifier. We're setting the modifier mode, and then we're setting the stat that it is going to change and the amount by which it's going to change that stat. But we haven't actually changed the stat yet. It's not until this line that we change anything. Excuse me. So when we change stuff, we say, okay, on the user, we want to look in the user's stats, and we want to call the function add timed modifier. If you see the mouse over, right, add timed modifier does not stack. Instead, re-adding the same type of modifier will just reset the existing one to the given duration. So all of the strength, all of the effects that share the same type need to have the same ID parameter, and that's this one. And you can see the parameters, the 4 parameters that we need to pass to add timed modifier in order to get it to work. We need to pass it a stat modifier, which we just created. We need to pass it a duration, which we created up above. We need to pass it an ID, and we need to pass it a sprite. And so those 4 you see here, the modifier, that's the modifier that we made here. The duration, that's the duration that we made up here. This is the ID, which needs to be unique for each different type of buff. And then finally, the effect sprite. The reason the ID needs to be different for each type of buff is basically if I take a strength potion and then I take a speed potion that has strength add, instead of giving me speed, it will just re-up the strength add. Right? The ID tells Unity which mod to add when. That's a good way to put it. And then finally, we're going to play a sprite, which again, we can define which sprite in the editor. So if we were going to change this to speed, we'd want to change strength change to speed change, again, for readability. The really important parts, we'd want to change this strength here to agility, and we would want to change this ID from strength add to speed add. Okay, hopefully that answers people. Hopefully that answers people's questions about the speed potion. Let me see. I'm gonna zip through the Q&A and see what people's questions are. How are the percentages rounded by default? That's a good question. I think they round to the nearest whole number. If they are
integers.
Yeah, if they're integers and you're adding percentages, I think they'll round to the nearest whole number. That's a good question though. Mode percentage based on overall values or on relative values. If I wanted to create a potion that added strength but dealt damage to the player, I wanted to make it plus 100% and minus 50% respectively. Would it take 50% of the max HP or the current HP? So the answer to that is that the players actually have 2 different stats. They have one stat that describes their maximum hit points and one stat that describes their current hit points. So it would be up to you to determine which of those 2 things was being affected by your potion. So if you told it minus 50% of current HP, it would take 50% off their current HP. If you said minus 50% of max HP, it would take 50% off their max HP. Somebody says, I don't understand what that means. And unfortunately, because I don't know when you posted that question, I don't know what that means. Oh, man, this took a lot longer than I expected. I apologize. We should...
You don't need to apologize, man. That's good stuff. That's great stuff. It's...
Thank you. I hope so. I hope that sort of clarified some of the stuff about, again, I mean, this stuff about how do variables work together? How do you update variable values? How do you use variables together to create functions? That's complex stuff. And I highly encourage you, we'll have the links at the end of the the presentation, but I really strongly encourage people to look at the project. This is the beginner code action RPG project, and there's a bunch more information online in Learn Live that takes you through these steps in like a more protracted, clearer, more, you know, like you can do them at your own pace style of instruction. So if this has been helpful, great. If this still feels confusing, go to that Learn Live site and check out the project there. Okay, audience questions. Gosh, that took a lot more than 10 minutes, but I feel like that was valuable. I do want to go over the WebGL build stuff briefly since we don't have a ton of time left. So the important things about the WebGL build, and people definitely had trouble with this. You know, in our, oh no, can everybody see my Unity? Am I sharing the right thing? You know, in our build settings, right? In general, build settings will default to this PC, Mac, and Linux standalone. But if we want to build for the web, then we need to build here for WebGL. So we click on WebGL, and it tells us in order to build a player, go to player settings to resolve incompatibility between the color space and the current settings. So in edit, I think it's project settings, player settings, we see that there's a warning here, color space. So it will not let us build in linear color space. We have to switch the color space to gamma. A lot of people noticed that when you switch the color space to gamma, when you play, it makes things really bloomy. It makes things really bright. And that's just a problem with the gamma space. And we're trying to debug this project to fix that. But right now, that's just like a bug in the project. That's nothing that you did wrong. I'm not going to actually step through this process because it will, you know, like it'll lock up my Unity because it will need to process a bunch of assets through, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the series of steps. So click on WebGL. You know, if you haven't changed your color space, come here to the player, set color space from linear to gamma. That's going to take a minute to process. Then you can go back and you can, down here, you can switch platforms. You can actually switch platforms now. You just can't build. So if you switch platforms, that will take an even longer time because, again, it needs to convert all of the assets over so that they are web enabled. Then once you've done that, I don't know that we're going to keep this submissions page open. I'd like to, but I'm not 100% certain. But once you've done that, you'll be able to go, you know, you'll have something that you can host online. So for people who started hosting their games on itch.io, you can go there, put your game there, see how it is, et cetera, et cetera. You know, wherever you want to host it, once you have that WebGL build, you can upload that to any hosting service, put that on the web, and have people play it. Okay. So this is the part, this is the fun part, which we had allotted a bunch of time and then I spent all this time talking. We did want to show some of the games that people made. I'm going to hand things over to Brian. I'm going to hand the presentation over to Brian because he has them loaded up on his computer. But yeah, we definitely wanted to show you. We had 3 submissions: Moose on the Loose by Ing Chen Liang, Slaughterfest version 0.2 by Mate88, and Cactus Confusion by our own Greg Lane. So this is Cactus Confusion. So you guys can see that the cool thing about this game is that our friendly moose sheriff has been replaced by a perfidious cactus. So you can actually go ahead and change the player sprite and have your players play as the cactus, as the bad guy. Or I guess sort of a turncoat cactus who fights other cactuses.
In this game they do.
What's that?
In this game they do fight each other.
Yeah. Can you move us around the environment a little bit? Yeah, there you go.
So we got our health potions.
Mm-hmm. There's a money spawner up there.
Now, are we going to share the link to let players or let people do this?
Yeah, there's a so this follows a YouTube
Okay.
tutorial about how to replace the moose player sprite with a cactus, and there's a link to the that tutorial at the end of this presentation. So we are going to show that. But yeah, I mean, the things that I think are important here are to remember that, things like character skins, right? Those are swappable. You can have your character change. You can decide like, rather than this moose character, I think it's more interesting if if we have the cactus as the playable character. The thing is that you need to make sure that the new skin has all of the same animations, all of the same reactions, and all of the same attributes that the original skin does. And that YouTube video will sort of help you go through that process a little bit.
I seem to be stuck. Something's glitching out here.
Boo.
But I got this boss man coming up to get me here.
Yeah, and then he really messed you up, man.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be rude, but it seems like this giant cactus is really doing a number on you.
Something's attacking me, but I can't see it. I don't understand. Glitching out.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's very tough to have run Unity and these at the same time, since they're all pretty resource intensive.
Uh-oh. Yes, they are. I see your point. Why you want to wait to build after. All right. Well, I'm glitching out here, and I'm very nervous about touching my screen.
Do you want to show any of the others? Can you show
Yeah.
Moose on the Loose?
Here's Moose on the Loose.
Nice.
And
ooh, Monty Hall.
Yeah, this one drove me crazy because the cactus was so small I could barely see it. But you can zoom in the game. But you know what?
Yeah.
The reason why I like this one is in the description down here. And this is a tip for everybody who's just starting out in Unity. And I love this, especially as an instructor, because it kind of matches the Unity way of educating yourself on how to use it. But this person said, I think I ended up playing too much around in a Unity editor rather than just coding. That's not a bad thing, because the more you play around with Unity, the better you're going to get at it, and your dev time is going to get faster and faster and faster. So I love that, and I think that's I find myself doing that a whole ton, especially when I'm learning new stuff. And the other thing that I liked about this was the fact that this person is discovering the API. So especially with beginners, if you guys can figure out how to use the API, because there's sample code, there's all sorts of, there's explanations and things like that. Again, your dev life is going to be a lot faster, and things are going to start to click a lot faster as well, because the Unity API is amazing. There's a lot of ways you can do stuff, but that's the best thing I liked about this game, because it, what was the learning journey that that this user is going through. So pretty amazing.
The developer definitely took the time to add a bunch of neat stuff to the game. So you can see there's, a backpack, there's a shirt, money, more potions. There's a luck potion that I saw earlier. So, having those different objects in game is pretty powerful. Suspicious pants, a giant barrel. A couple questions that people had. Let's see.
Ooh, this is cool.
Somebody wanted to know you know, somebody felt like this session is a little bit too advanced, I encourage you to go back and watch our beginner series from the beginning. So the FPS project definitely covers, it's no code. So the FPS project covers like, you know, navigation through Unity. It covers how to attach scripts to objects, all of that stuff. So definitely, if you're feeling like this is a little more advanced than I want, go back to the beginning of the beginner series. We are also, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but I think that we are also going to have in August, watch this space, because I think we are also going to have another set of pretty you know, low level beginner style sessions happening then. You didn't hear it from me though. You did now, obviously. Okay, let's see.
Let's check out Slaughterfest.
Yeah, definitely.
You definitely don't want to put on your audio in this one because all of the skeleton sounds overwhelming.
Skeleton sounds. Can I, Brian? I think if you close the other two tabs, Slaughterfest will run a little faster because you're probably that's.
Well, this one I like because of the extensive nature. There is, I mean, as you can see, I obviously played through it already because there was a different boss right here that actually gave me some boots.
Some loot. Nice.
Well, some boots these boots. And this is one of the things I liked about this was the humor involved in this one because these are athlete foot boots. And with these boots, you can harvest the power of an athlete's foot. So itchy.
So itchy.
So itchy.
That's amazing. That's spectacular.
Oh, look at the stats on that thing. Strength +5, agility +10. I love it.
Wow.
Love it.
That's big boots.
There's a map on this one too. That was
yeah, that's right. Yeah, this user definitely added a bunch of neat stuff to this environment. So, you know, there's a lot of possibility for you guys as developers to take these assets and play around with them and learn a lot. Okay.
Very extensive. I didn't have time to finish the whole thing, but there's more. Look at all. This is the fun thing about this. If you're a hack and slasher like Diablo, this is the game for you. There's no shortage of things to slaughter in this game.
Things to slaughter in this. Yeah, I mean, adding new enemies is really impressive. Like, you know, importing a whole new enemy class and figuring out how to integrate them into the game is a really great. It's a great sort of tutorial task for yourself.
A lot of loot boxes, a lot of different types of things. Ooh, I didn't
nice. We are almost wrapped up on time. So, you know, I do want to thank everybody who submitted. You know, we especially if you've been sticking through this beginner series from the very beginning. This has been a really incredible experience for me. I think I speak for Brian as well. It's been so much fun and so great to get to meet members of the community. You know, yeah, definitely join the Unity Learners Connect group. I'll ask James to please put the link in the chat. And then the full project for the creator kit, is here, the beginner code kit. So definitely, you know, check that out. Again, that has some really great step-by-step instructions. If you were stuck, if you were confused about something, that's a great resource for you. The video about how to customize to add your character, to change the playable main character, that's here. So, you know, please, again, don't hesitate. Check out the video online on YouTube. You know, see if that's a good tutorial level for you to start figuring out, you know, how to swap assets and how to change animation skins and all that stuff. I think we're gonna
guys get on Unity Learn.
Yeah.
And do I mean, I can't understate this or overstate this enough, is that the more you do, the better you're going to get. It might take some time, but you guys are going to get it. You're going to get it. So you just got to keep pushing, and it's going
Yeah.
to start to become a lot more clear the more you do. So uh, keep pushing on that Unity Learn premium site. That's
Yeah.
amazing news that it's all free.
Yeah, premium is free long term now, so definitely uh, take advantage of that. It's a lot of really great it's a lot of really great content. It's a lot of really great uh, just instruction. So don't hesitate. We are going to stick around for another few minutes and answer people's questions. Thank you again. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in the future. Again, stay tuned. Check us out in August. I think we've got a pretty cool offering that has not quite yet been announced, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you. And yeah, have a great afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are.
You guys rock.
Somebody Boyan, I remember Boyan from our FPS. Boyan was one of our FPS submitters. Yes, Boyan wrote a heal over time script. After 6 heal ticks, the visual effect stops showing. How basically how to make a heal over time continue past 6 ticks. I think this is only part of the script here, so it's hard to diagnose. But I wouldn't be surprised. I think if you duplicate those heal particle clones, figure out where those heal particle clones are being spawned from, and see if you can make more of them, and then come back and set your health boost to take advantage of that. Again, without seeing the whole script, it's hard. People are having trouble submitting a game. Again, I think we're gonna have we're gonna work on that submissions page a little bit. Somebody wants to know, how do I know if all enemies have been killed? That's a really great question. So that kind of question, there are, like any problem in computer programming, there are a bunch of different ways to solve that. The way that I like is to basically, what you can do is you can have kind of a script that lives on an object that's invisible, or it's off in the sky somewhere where the player isn't going to see it. And every time an enemy dies, you can have them update a value on that script. So subtract 1 from a value on that script until that script is at 0, which tells you that all of the enemies have been killed. But it means that you have to make sure that every enemy is reporting itself to that script. So that can be a little bit tricky.
And you can update that in the GUI too. You're gonna have to.
Yeah.
Variable in your GUI that's gonna tell the player when they're doing that. Sorry, I'm playing one of the games. We're playing Slaughterhouse.
Nice.
But I keep an eye on the Q&A too.
Yeah, somebody asks how to set up your basic scene, place, and then add stuff. Again, in this series, we're using pre-generated assets, pre-generated environments. So I encourage you, download that beginner code asset or asset pack, and just import that into your game, and it will unpack that whole project, and then you can play in there. Building a Unity project from scratch, definitely, it's a great set of skills to develop, but I would focus for now, especially if you're a beginner, focus on projects that have already been created. Focus on stuff that's kind of already been built for you.
Yeah, someone asked what's a good order of courses to follow in Unity, and that's a very tough question to answer because it depends on your interest. I mean, if you want more about scripting, there's tons of scripting tutorials. If you want to, like for example, there's a lot of Unity and Learn Live about post processing. Uh, Depends on where you want to start. I would start, if it were my choice, I would start at the with this tutorial if you want to learn scripting. The FPS tutorials that we've done on Unity Learn Live. I mean, if you go to the
Yeah.
Unity Learn site, there's a lot of suggestions that come up from a lot of different providers. So, you know, I don't know. That's the best way I can answer that question. I mean, it depends on where you want to start. I mean, start
Yeah.
at the beginning. That's the
Yeah, if you just want to start from the beginning, I'd say go back and watch our first FPS series and see if that starts to answer your questions. Couple more questions real fast. Is there any legality if I share this to my friends or let my son play it? Nope. These are for home use. These are perfectly fine. Please feel free to let people play it. Obviously, these assets can't be used in commercial projects, but if you just want them to be like, if you just want to play with your family, with your friends, 100% fine. Have a good time. Somebody asks how to decay the speed boost over time. This is a good question. This is a little bit tricky. So without getting too into it, if you remember this line, this like user.stats.add timed modifier, what I would do is I would probably try to think what the easiest way to do this would be. So I think if you were writing a script, for a timed decaying boost, what I would do is I would put an update loop in here. So the update loop runs once every frame that the computer is running, and it's one of the ways that you can use to keep time. And what you can do is you can put a timer in the update loop, so you can be checking how much time has it been since this script started running, and you can call that add timed modifier. Basically, like when the duration, what you could do is you could make the add time modifier be like have a duration of 2 seconds instead of 10 seconds. And at the end of it, when it ends, you would have it called again, but with a duration of 2 seconds and with a strength of whatever your stat increases would be lowered. So you'd get 5 for 2 seconds, and then 4 for 2 seconds, and then 3 for 2 seconds, 2 for 2 seconds, 1 for 2 seconds. And then you need to make sure that the effect, when the strength modifier went to 0, you'd need to make sure that the effect ended. Tricky. That's a great, it's like a really good test project for yourself. Okay. I think that is all the time that we have. I really want to answer this question. My head can't get around the fact that the bool function always returns through, or am I missing something? Oh, I'm not sure that I understand this question. Remember that this use function needs to return either true or false. It returns true if we want that item to get removed from the if we want the item to get removed from the player's inventory. It should return false if the item will stay in the player's inventory. Okay. With that, I think that's it. I apologize that we can't answer more questions. Again, thank you guys so much. I will hopefully get to see you guys soon. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and your Unity learning journey.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.